Welcome to part 3 of We Are What We Hated. And this is with Larry, the contractor guy. And I want to say, hey, first of all, to you, how are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
You weren't supposed to ask that. I did a recording yesterday, in fact. That was the month that was, with Andy Colden and Eugenia Master-Story, who lives in Woodstock, New York. So that was pretty interesting. But what got back into the conversation was about Nazism. Even if I wanted to steer the conversation in that direction, it comes up. Now, you see, because Colden is kind of hip to what's going on, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard him make some statements that showed me he's done some research and knows what he's talking about when it comes to that.
Yeah, and she did as well. I mean, that was a cold interview for me because I really didn't know her mindset or anything, but we were talking about it and it just, popped in there, along with what's happening now in the supposed, well, I'll tell you what, I'll distill this down real quick and ask you a question, and I think that'll springboard us into what you're going to do.
Okay.
My assumption, and she alluded to this also, we didn't get into particulars. The feeling is that if this is supposed to be some kind of pan-Islamic uprising, which one, I believe it is, mm-hmm. Then two, I believe we've taken a very big step, a very big turn on the dial toward a sizable fight down the road.
Oh yeah, I think we're being set up for the new Crusades. I think that, I know for a fact that the Muslim Brotherhood is part of what I would call international fascism. The Muslim Brotherhood was very much connected with the Nazis. In fact, one of its members, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, was probably an even bigger Jew hater than Hitler, if that's possible. And during World War II, he did broadcast in Berlin, pro-Nazi broadcast in Berlin. And he also was allowed to form up his own Waffen-SS unit. He was given a commission in the German army, I should say in the SS, Waffen-SS. And he went and recruited Muslims in Europe, I guess especially in Bosnia. And yes, the Muslim Brotherhood was started by a man named Hassan al-Banna, who was a dedicated Hitler advocate. I believe it was started in 1928 in Egypt. And I'm not really prepared to go into all the details about it, but I believe what they're trying to set up there is to create such a hotbed of radical Islam, which is not true Islam. In fact, it's heretical for anybody to do a suicide bombing and so forth. But don't let that bother you. They just go ahead and do it anyway because that's really what their goal is, to forward what I would call Islamic fascist ideas in the world.
Well, let me hold you. You made a good point, and I think it bears out saying. And that is, you said it's against the rules, more or less.
It is.
Okay, but here we go. They're no different than we are with the Christians who think we should go to war over whatever they consider righteous or religious purposes.
Exactly.
So you see, yeah, I mean, it's the same.
It's the same
right,
thing, and
right.
People are being led by the same entity into this. We've discussed how that the overall goal of the New World Order was to bring in world government through a series of 3 world wars. And the best way in the world that I can see for them to get a 3rd world war going is to get a conflict going in the Middle East that goes full-blown into World War III.
Yeah, and I think you'll agree that right now the Muslims are having a honeymoon because of what they think they've won. Mm-hmm. But they have traitors in their midst, just like we have traitors in our midst. And you couldn't fool the people unless, one, you had traitors, and two, they were effective.
Right.
So they're thinking, hey, happy times are here again, or for the first time, or whatever. This is going to be Fat City. And they're going to support the ones who supposedly gave them that freedom, and then they're going to be taking down a radical Islamic road. and lied to, just like Christians here are lied to. And let's face it, too, the same thing with Jews. You have to have a radical group in there to go ahead and get everybody whipped up into a frenzy.
Right. It's an old, it's an old technique, agent provocateur, getting things stirred up because you have a hidden agenda. And the Muslim Brotherhood is very popular in Egypt right now. I mean, extremely. And they're very popular across the Middle East. And I believe you're going to see a radical Islamic government in Tunisia as well. And as soon as they finally get rid of Gaddafi, which I think it's only a matter of time, but I'm sure there'll be a radical Islamic. You're going to have a confederation of radical Islamic confederation in the Middle East. And obviously they're going to pump up a war with the Jews and Israel, and of course at some point in time the United States is going to get involved in there, and I think that may be the catalyst that finally drives this country down and finally crushes us on the rocks. I would think that that it'll go nuclear. I mean, I hate to freak anybody out, but I mean, they're working on it. I mean, you know that Iran is going, even though they're Shiites and most of the people are Sunnis, but still the radicals there are working as hard as they can to get a nuke, and they may have one already.
I think, right. I mean, let's face it, they didn't make them not to use them.
No.
I mean, this goes back to the 40s, so why are we even thinking in those terms? But that's the way human beings are. So, yeah.
If they figure they can use nukes, get rid of Israel and get rid of whoever else their enemies they want to get rid of, maybe us, probably us, and they think they can do it without wiping themselves out, they'll go for it. And some of them are so radical and so screwed up in the head that they don't even care if they blow the whole world up as long as they get rid of their enemies, take us down. That's kind of the philosophy. Not very well spoken, maybe not too erudite, but that's the way it looks to me.
Well, me too. And so we'll find out whether or not what's taking place right now.
Well, I think it's an intelligence operation, just like the United States overthrew the Shah of Iran. Well, they overthrew Mossadegh, who had been elected by the people, when Mossadegh in Iran wanted to go ahead and nationalize the oil industry. Well, the CIA and the British intelligence were not too keen on that idea, because obviously they're protecting the interests of American and British oil companies. So they go in there and they overthrow Mossadegh and install the Shah of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, I believe is his name. And of course he went in there and he, with his secret police, the Savak, was extremely tough on the people, and of course they wanted to get rid of him. And for whatever reason, the CIA back in the late 70s went in and installed Khomeini, and brought in radical Islamic, rule by the mullahs over there. And I think that was the beginning of what they were planning to do in the Middle East. I think it's it's just a Hegelian dialectic, pushing things forward.
One other thing too, and I want to get you back on track, but
sure, no problem.
What was interesting was in 2003, and I may mention this, I might even have saved the legislation. The politicians put out a resolution that maybe it's time to get Iran straight about how they handle their women. I'm not kidding you. Democracy and all this stuff, the usual,
I believe it.
Yeah, the usual buzzwords, and that interestingly happened before we ever went into Iraq. Do I have that right? Yeah, because they started in Afghanistan first. Anyway, the point's well taken. That, I mean, first of all, it's none of our business. Second of all, that was the first time I saw Iran pop up on our we don't like list. Because, I mean, they've been quiet since the hostages were released and made Arctic Parkas fashionable, if you remember.
Well,
No. You know what? All right, I'm sorry. I'm thinking real quick. Saturday Night Live did a skit right after the hostages had been released. And they were trying to repatriate and debrief and get back to normal the hostages. So they had a shot from the back of this classroom, and everybody's sitting there, and all the chair desks, like you have in high school stuff. Everybody's wearing a parka with the hood up. So you got all these bodies with the hood up, and who comes in to help facilitate this welcome back to the United States is Henny Youngman.
I love Henny Youngman.
I know, and I do too. And he comes in with that.
He's the greatest, man.
He comes in with that smile plastered on his face. You know what I mean? With the violin in one hand, and he goes, "Hey guys, I think you'll like the food here. It's fit for a king." And he bends over and goes, "Here, king. Here, king."
Oh God, I love Henny Youngman.
Yeah, he's the best. What a guy. Anyway. So that was a minutia that didn't need to be injected into the conversation, but you allowed me to, and you have to, because it's my show, and I do what I want to do.
Yeah, I'm having fun with it, you know.
All right. Okay.
As dark as the subject is, we should have some fun, you know.
Oh, we better, because there ain't a whole lot of
ho-hos.
ho-hos.
We won't make it.
Yeah, there ain't a whole lot of ho-hos around these days.
No, it's not. It's not real laughing matter type stuff.
Well, I got an email just before I came on with you, and I had to laugh because it was about Charlie Sheen. And what I was saying is, actually, I'm glad. I mean, I'd rather read about Sheen than, the Raghead Revolution. And it kind of bridges the gap between the Super Bowl and opening day, so.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I'll deal with Charlie Sheen. Keep it going. He'll get a radio show.
Well, it's, I saw him on CNN the other night for some reason. I hardly ever watch any news outlet, but happened to see that he was on. I just kind of turned it on, and he was just kind of rambling with this British guy get the guy's name on the show, and rambling on about what he had done, what he hadn't done. And I mean, after a while, I just kind of got the impression that, he's not dealing with a full deck,
Really?
It's just not. It's not. The elevator doesn't go all the way to the top. He just keeps telling about what he's done. Things that and it's like, man, alive. Why don't you just shut up, Charlie? It might help.
Now they got a company putting out shirts with Charlie's face on it, with all his famous little sayings.
Yeah.
All right. So getting back to it, I just would say that the Muslim Brotherhood is kind of what I would call the traitorous aspect that's going to curry favor with the people, but eventually will be the means of their destruction.
Right. Well, they're part and parcel of the New World Order. They're the Islamic wing of it, and they've been there for a long, long time. Like I said, I mean, it dates back to the 20s and 30s when they first hooked up with Hitler and the Nazis, and they even made a deal with Hitler that during the time of Rommel, if Rommel ever took over in Egypt, that they would make sure that they would be a force to wipe out the British there. They would try to kill as many of the British as they could. And they've always been into terrorism. They've always been into violence, which is reason I brought that up is kind of make me laugh seeing this stuff. Well, they've eschewed violence. They are no longer violent. Right.
Right. Sure. Okay.
For 80 years they were violent. Now they're not going to be.
No. So I think we're in agreement that this could be a major shift. And
they're just basically the old Arab Nazis, and they were thrown out of Egypt. Nasser got sick of them because they kept trying to undercut him, and they're just. It's a long story. A lot of I'd have to make a kind of prepare to explain all that to an audience, but they're just the old Arab Nazis. That's what they are, and they're there for a reason. They're there to provoke more trouble, and I think you're going to see an Islamic Federation in the Middle East. It's going to be a driving force for a Third World War.
Yep. All right, so you're going to take us back in time, are you?
Sure. I wanted to today to talk about the Skull and Bones Society and talk about, in particular, Bonesman Harriman and Bush, and how that they were in the lead in Wall Street in the financial support of the fledgling Nazi Party through Fritz Thyssen. And I can't think of a better source to talk about any of this stuff than Anthony Sutton. So he's kind of one of my favorite historians, probably my all-time favorite, because he just is very scholarly, and he doesn't put in a lot of hyperbole, but he gets to the heart of the matter. At any rate, in his book, America's Secret Establishment, The Order of Skull and Bones, he did a great deal of research back in the late 70s, early 80s on Skull and Bone Society because he received material from someone who was related to Bonesman, and they let him in kind of on the secret. And he said that prior to reading about the society and who was in it, that he'd had a lot of questions about how things had developed in the United States. And he writes in there, those on the inside know it as the Order. Others have known it for more than 150 years as Chapter 322 of a German secret society. More formally, for legal purposes, the Order was incorporated as the Russell Trust in 1856. It was also once known as the Brotherhood of Death. Those who make light of it or want to make fun of it call it Skull and Bones or just plain Bones. The American chapter of this Germanic order was founded in 1833 at Yale University by General William Huntington Russell and Alphonso Taft, who in 1876 became Secretary of War in the Grant administration. Alphonso Taft was the father of William Howard Taft, who was the only man to be President and Chief Justice of the United States. Next section is, what is the Order? He says the Order is not just another campus Greek letter fraternal society with passwords and hand grips, common to most campuses. Chapter 322 is a secret society whose members are sworn to silence. It only exists on the Yale campus that we know about. It has rules, it has ceremonial rites, it is not at all happy with prying, probing citizens, known among initiates as outsiders or vandals. Its members always deny membership or are supposed to deny membership, and in checking hundreds of autobiographical listings for members, we found only a half dozen who cited an affiliation with Skull and Bones. The rest were not. An interesting point is whether the many members in various administrations or who hold government positions have declared their membership in the autobiographical data supplied for FBI background checks. He says, what is the significance of the 322 in Chapter 322? William Russell imported the society from Germany, and so it has been argued 322 stands for 32, as in 1832, the second chapter of this German organization. Possibly a Chapter 320 and 321 may exist somewhere, and 323 is the designation of a room within the Skull and Bones at Yale. He talks about the fact that very little has been written about him. This book came out in the early 80s, I believe in 83. He talks about an Esquire article, and I've seen this guy, Ron Rosenbaum, who wrote this article for Esquire in September of 77. I've seen him interviewed before on History Channel, and he was also on a piece that they did on Skull and Bones in 2004 on 60 Minutes with, can't remember, it wasn't Mike Wallace, one of the guys on 60 Minutes, but anyway. It says here, only one article is known to have been published within the last 100 years on the Order. Unfortunately, is a superficial, almost mocking review, and provides some enlightenment but little contribution to historical knowledge. The article is The Last Secret of Skull and Bones by Ron Rosenbaum. Rosenbaum's a Yale graduate attracted by the fictional possibility of a secret society out to control the world. He's apparently not aware of the political implications. The contribution is a blend of known, authentic documents and outright hearsay. On the other hand, Rosenbaum does make some notable observations. Among those are, the people who have shaped America's national character since it ceased being an undergraduate power had their undergraduate character shaped in that crypt over there, i.e. the temple. Another comment, when a new member is initiated in the Order, tonight he will die to the world and be born again into the Order, as he will thenceforth refer to it. The Order is a world unto itself, in which he will have a new name and 14 new blood brothers, also with new names. And when Rosenbaum starts to inquire about the Order, he's told they don't like people tampering and prying. The power of Bones is incredible. They've got their hands on every lever of power in the country. You'll see, it's like trying to look into the mafia. Remember, they're a secret society, too. Well, that kind of gives you an idea of what Skull and Bones is about, and he goes into more depth, and in particular, he talks about individuals within it, and particularly the Harriman family. And he says, in the first few days of June 8, 1983, a prominent American, a private citizen, flew to Moscow for a confidential chat with Yuri Andropov. A State Department interpreter went along. This American was not the president, not the vice president, nor the Secretary of State, nor any member of the Reagan administration. It was a private individual, W. Averill Harriman. The first time any American has talked with Yuri Andropov since the death of his predecessor, Brezhnev. So who is W. Averill Harriman? The older Harriman, a prominent and not too scrupulous railroad magnate, sent both his sons to Yale. William Averill Harriman and Edward Roland Noel Harriman joined the order. A good example of how old line families in the order absorbed new wealth families, although as history is unfolded, it may be that Harriman and his fellow investment bankers have dominated the direction of the order in the past few decades. It goes on to talk about the Brown brothers connection, the Harriman and Brown brothers. In the 1930s, W.A. Harriman and Company merged with Brown Brothers. This was an older financial house whose partners were also members of the order. Alexander Brown was founded in 1800 in New York and Philadelphia. By the 1970s, the relatively unknown private international banking firm of Brown Brothers Harriman, with assets of about $1.5 billion, had taken in so many of the brotherhood that out of the 26 individual partners, no less than 9 were members of the order. We don't know how much greater the concentration of members is. And to make it more interesting, Prescott Bush, father of President George H.W. Bush, both in the order, was a partner in Brown Brothers Harriman for over 40 years. And he goes on to list the people that were bonesmen that were in Brown Brothers, and it's pretty extensive. Don't need to read all that, but the student newspaper at Yale, in fact, there's quite a few people at Yale over a period of time that have resented the Skull and Bones Society, and they've written about it. The editor of the Iconoclast wrote in the 1870s, he wrote a little poem here, and on their breast they wear a sign that tells their race and name. It is the ghastly badge of death, and from this kingdom came the son of Satan, son of sin, the enemy of man. Sound like we weren't too happy with them there, and considered them to be something of a threat. He goes on to say, the activities of the order are directed toward changing our society, changing the world, to bring about a new world order. This will be a planned order with heavily restricted individual freedom, without constitutional protection, without national boundaries or cultural distinction. We deduce this objective by examining and summing up the actions of individual members. There's been a consistent pattern of activity over 100 years. Part of this activity has been in cooperation with a group, which is a British equivalent. Now, if, for example, we found that the dominant interest of members was raising ducks, that they wrote articles about ducks, bred ducks, sold ducks, formed duck studying councils, developed a philosophy of ducks, then it would be reasonable to conclude they had an objective concerning ducks. That's not mere random activity. A little humor there. Maybe very little. Historically, operations of the order have concentrated on society, how to change society in a specific manner toward a specific goal, a new world order. We know the elements of society that will have to be changed in order to bring about this new world order. We can then examine the order's actions in this context. And lastly, as far as this book, he says the state is absolute. This is one of their objectives. How can there exist a common objective when members are apparently acting in opposition to one another, which they do from time to time? Probably the most difficult task in this work will be to get across to the reader what is really an elementary observation, that the objective of the order is neither left nor right. Left and right are artificial devices to bring about change, and the extremes of political left and political right are vital elements in the process of controlled change. The answer to this seemingly political puzzle lies in Hegelian logic. Remember that both Marx and Hitler, the extremes of left and right, presented as textbook enemies, evolved out of the same philosophical system, Hegelianism. That brings screams of intellectual anguish from Marxists and Nazis, but is well known to any student of political systems. The dialectical process did not originate with Marx, as Marxists claim, but with Fichte and Hegel in late 18th and early 19th century Germany. In the dialectical process, a clash of opposites brings about a synthesis. For example, a clash of political left and political right brings about another political system, a synthesis of the two, neither left nor right. This conflict of opposites is essential to bring about change. Today, this process can be identified in the literature of the Trilateral Commission, where change is promoted and conflict management is termed the means to bring about this change. In the Hegelian system, conflict is essential. Furthermore, for Hegel and systems based on Hegel, the state is absolute. The state requires complete obedience from the individual citizen. An individual does not exist for himself in the so-called organic systems, but only to perform a role in the operation of the state. He finds freedom only in obedience to the state. There was no freedom in Hitler's Germany. There is no freedom for the individual under Marxism. Neither will there be in the New World Order. If it sounds like George Orwell's 1984, it is.
Right.
In brief, the state is supreme and conflict is used to bring about the ideal society. Individuals find freedom in obedience to the rulers. Well, I think he kind of gave a pretty good summary of what the New World Order is all about, and in particular the Skull and Bone Society, which is one of its main components. Unless you have any questions, I've got some more stuff to read here.
Nope.
Okay. Next, I'll go to an article by a British writer who's fairly good, by the name of David Guyat. He writes quite a bit about the New World Order, and you know, I thought it would be good to get his viewpoint on this. And it's called Princes of Plunder, The Shape of Treachery and the Bridge at Arnhem by David Guyat. If President George W. Bush has his way, then the spread of the American system of democracy will continue to proliferate around the world. There are those, however, who argue that the American form of democracy has little to do with a genuine democratic representation, but rather more closely resembles a revolving fascist dictatorship beholden to the interest of a wealthy elite and big business. This form of government, it is argued, has its underlying model, the European Synarchist movement that was founded in the 1870s by Joseph Alexander St. Ives. St. Ives considered the medieval Knights Templar to be ultimate synarchists of their time, and consequently drew on Templar ideals when formulating his own. St. Ives' movement came to the fore in the 1920s following the end of World War I and the signing of the Versailles Treaty. In its essence, synarchy advocates that government be run by a secret society or cabal, an elite of enlightened initiates who rule from behind the scenes. And as authors Lynn Pinkett and Clive Prince describe it, it is therefore doesn't matter which political party holds power in a state or even what political system that state has. Synarchists would step in and take control of the key state institutions. In the United States, one such secret society worthy of note is Yale University's Order of the Skull and Bones. Entry into the order involves elaborate ritual and is accompanied by a change of name. No longer is a neophyte known by his family name, but assumes the identity of a knight. George Bush's great-grandfather, Prescott Bush, was also a bonesman, as was George Bush's favorite uncle, Herbert Walker. In point of fact, almost all of the so-called Eastern establishment families have been enrolled in the Skull and Bones. Author Anthony Sutton, in his groundbreaking four-part series, The Order, states that the U.S. Order links to Britain through the Rhodes-Milner-Oxford group, but has German origins. The U.S. Order also links to the Guggenheim, Schiff, and Warburg families. Despite having definite anti-Semitic tendencies until most recent times, Sutton's own research linked the order to the founding and growth of Nazism and considered it likely that the German original was the Illuminati, which is what I think it was too. It's hard to prove. The Bush family's political dynasty and indeed its wealth arose from the Nazi connections forged by Prescott Bush, who worked for Nazi magnate Fritz Thyssen. Bush's uncle Herbert Walker, was likewise employed by Thyssen. An even darker episode was reported by a Dutch intelligence agent who stated that Prescott Bush also managed a portion of the slave labor force located at I.G. Farben's Auschwitz plant, the infamous Nazi death camp. Working for Prescott Bush was Allen Dulles, who would later become a director of the CIA following a highly questionable career in the war, where he was posted to head up the Swiss office of the American Intelligence Service, the OSS. Before the war, Dulles was appointed the U.S. legal counsel to I.G. Farben. Another law client of Dulles was Fritz Thyssen. These interrelationships are at the very least very chummy. Some believe them to be treacherous. The key period of the growth of synarchism followed on the heels of the Russian Revolution and led to the rise of Pan-European movement in 1922. The PEM, or Pan-European movement, was embraced by powerful forces inside Germany. This included the wealthy banker Max Warburg, who financed PEM. Warburg was a director of massive chemical cartel IG Farben that helped hoist Adolf Hitler to power. Curiously enough, Warburg was also involved in helping Lenin to travel to Russia in 1917, thus providing succor to the Bolshevik Revolution that Hitler later so detested. Is this a case of the left hand not knowing what the right hand was doing, or could it be merely an example of the Hegelian dialectic of forging conflict in order to forge the future shape and direction of human history? Well, I think it is the Hegelian dialectic at work. It goes on to say the industrialists and bankers who funded Hitler's rise to power in 1933 had their contributions processed through Hjalmar Sachs' account at the private Delbrück Schickler Bank in Berlin. The funds in this account were administered by Hitler's deputy, Rudolf Hess. Delbrück Schickler Bank was a subsidiary of Metallgesellschaft AG Metall, by far the largest non-ferrous metal company in Germany. Metallgesellschaft was jointly owned by IG Farben and the British Metal Corporation. One of the two British directors of Metall was Oliver Lytton, who was appointed the controller of non-ferrous metals in 1939 and 40 and became the Minister of Production in 1942 and 45 and a member of Churchill's War Cabinet. Littleton's mother was, by a merry coincidence, a member of the Rhodes Milner Oxford Group, whereas the eldest son of the 5th Baron Littleton has been the private secretary of Lord Selborne during his years in South Africa. As stated earlier, the group is the British arm of the American Order of the Skull and Bones, or is it the other way around? Either way, the Skull and Bones is a chapter of a German secret society. The originating prong of the group and the order are, in the view of Professor Anthony Sutton, almost certainly the outlawed Bavarian Illuminati. Well, I think we see from all of this discussion that there are very powerful forces using the Hegelian dialectic to forge ahead and form a new world order.
Who was it exactly? Would you restate that again? Who is the one identified as helping Lenin?
Okay, that was Oliver Littleton, and he was appointed controller of non-ferrous metals in 39 and 40, and became a member of the Minister of Production. He was part of Hitler's War Cabinet.
Okay, so, all right. This is another reference you were making to the Hegelian dialectic. I mean, Hitler and the boys are supposed to hate Bolshevism and communism. And yet,
I'm sorry, that was actually Warburg who helped.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I got it mixed up there.
That's all right.
There's so many names here.
Well, that's why I was wondering. Warburg is the one that was tasked with abetting Lenin, right?
Right.
Well, I'm assuming he also helped Trotsky.
Yeah, he may have. I'm not sure.
I mean,
all I know is that it seems odd that all these bankers, these high-powered bankers, seem to back both sides. I mean, they help the Nazis, they help the commies, you know.
Well, I'm wondering, that was the... it's been a long time since I read that stuff, but supposedly Warburg was the individual then that gave the Bolsheviks $20 million. You know,
Anthony Sutton's book, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, talks a lot about the financing of the Bolsheviks. And
well, it's interesting because now Lenin was, I assume he was quartered in England or France prior to him being helped into the Soviet, the Soviet Union.
Well, yeah, he was in 1917. The Germans brought him, I believe, through Finland. They took him in through Finland and put him into Russia so that he could get together with the other Bolsheviks and pull off the revolution.
Right, and then Trotsky,
at least lead the revolution. There were other people involved too.
And Trotsky was brought in from, well, obviously he was brought in from...
Trotsky stayed in the United States for a long time.
Yeah, and he got
New York City.
And then he got caught,
Mm-hmm.
I guess, taking a Canadian steamer across Europe or no, it came out of the United States. Canadian Navy, I think, caught him.
Yeah.
And both Wilson and the Prime Minister of England at the time said, let him go. Mm-hmm. And they let him go. This I find so interesting, too, and it is, you're right, it is, I believe, Wall Street and was it Wall Street and the Rise of Bolshevism? Do I have that right?
Yeah, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution.
Okay, it was The Rise of Hitler is the other book.
Yeah, all that stuff's online, too, for anybody listening.
Yeah, reformed-theology I think org has a bunch of them. Best any money can buy. No, the reason I'm saying that is it goes even beyond that with Sutton. Sutton says, okay, now they supposedly had humanitarian legations that went in, and they weren't too humanitarian. What did he identify out of something like 20-something people that went over? Like they had 3 doctors, the rest were like heads of an international harvester.
Right.
Damn. And of course, you remember me talking about the book Secret Agent by Bruce, what's his name? Okay. I can't remember it now. I will. Where he talks about being sent in by England, and I know this is getting off a little bit into the Bolshevik Revolution, Bruce Lockhart.
Right.
And Secret Agent said that he was there to find out, one, would the Bolsheviks hold after at least an original outing of the Mensheviks, the Tsars. And he said that he found it interesting that the only person for whom Lenin always had time was, I believe it was Raymond Robin, who was the head of the Red Cross at the time. Mm-hmm. But the Red Cross had already been hijacked by Rockefeller. So there you go. Yeah. But you could not get in to see Lenin, so Lockhart said, but every time Raymond Robin popped up, boop, he went in. So what does this all mean? It means that financiers, industrialists, were funding both sides.
Yeah,
they were
going to make a huge profit, and they were also pushing the world closer to what they want, which is a new world order. And we've discussed that that's, the ultimate in collectivism, the ultimate in the state. And what we're going to have is a world run by an oligarchy of corporatists.
Well,
and I think they're succeeding quite well with it because, I was thinking today that one thing I wanted to state on the show is for all those folks out there that may be listening who think that they're going to stop the New World Order, I got news for you. It's already here. We're in the early stages of it, but the New World Order has triumphed. It's already here. And anybody who's saying that they've got it on the run is, seriously delusional as far as I'm concerned.
No, don't say that. Buy my video.
Yeah, you can buy those videos. But they're not going to do you much good.
But here's what's interesting, as we see Germany and Russia, I think. And, going along with this Peikoff book, The Ominous Parallels, and how a complete society was manipulated. But it was to do something outward. Russia never seems to have been driven to go outward. You know what I mean? Whatever they whipped up, or first of all, they were brutal to their own people, which I always find interesting, to say the least. They culled their own population. Did away with, I guess, with any factions that could possibly be self-persevering, like the kulaks.
Yeah.
But
they were also led by a man who was a megalomaniac and a paranoid, just extremely paranoid in Stalin.
Well, but they didn't go on the offensive. You know what I mean? You see Germany twice wanting to grab a whole lot of territory. I can't really accuse Russia of doing that.
Well, actually, the Russians did make a deal with the Germans in 1939 when they had their pact, and the deal was that they would get the eastern half of Poland, and that they would be given the territories of Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Finland. There was one catch in that is that Finland said, "I don't think so," and they fought back. But they did attack Finland, and they did, inflict quite a few casualties. Eventually, the Finns had to give in because they didn't have an air force. But early on in that war, they were using really sharp tactics against the Russians. They would surround them using ski troops and cut up their columns. They used very smart tactics, and they knew how to fight in their terrain, and they knew how to dress for it, and they had ski troops that were really good. and they gave the Russians hell. And finally, the only reason that the Russians won was because they used their air force against the Finnish towns. And of course, the Finns didn't want to see their population massacred in that way, and they had to give in. But when the war started for real with the Russians and the Germans, the Finns, the only people that would help the Finns out, and all the Finns wanted was their territory back. And they aligned themselves with the Third Reich, which they may regret now, but they did. And once they got their own territory back from the Russians, they told the Germans to kiss off, and they quit fighting, which made the Germans kind of angry. But, yeah, that's the only time I can think of that the Russians actually made the big push, outside of their own territory. You're right.
It seems that what Nazism brought with itself is probably a greater meanness and hatred, because they got that country got mobilized to go ahead and strike out. Yeah, your point's well taken about Finland, but for the most part, the people really never really were worked up, I guess, for anything except defense. And I'm just wondering, what it is about Nazism that. What I'm saying is, as we're talking now, we're not saying we're being invested by, Russian brand Bolshevism or communism, but we're saying that we're becoming more and more like a Nazi Germany, and we will be motivated once again to strike outward. So that's the linchpin there. Whereas the Russians, I think, I guess they just got sold on the idea of Mother Russia and protect it. That was the game plan. Don't get me wrong. If it had been the other way around, anybody would, anything that the elites want to do will get done, but it didn't seem to be Russia's role to become too offensive.
All the years, during the Cold War years, the Russians' main idea was not so much to use their own troops and their own military, although at times they did repress revolutions, say in Hungary and other places in Czechoslovakia. But their general idea was to foment revolutions from within. Using Marxist theory, and they would go in and they would arm revolutionaries within South America, Africa, and Asia, etc. And they never would directly confront the United States. It just didn't fit in their game plan. But they were aggressive in trying to bring the world to communism. They wanted to, and that's how they did it. Though was through sponsoring revolutions within a different country.
Okay. No, I'm just thinking about the difference between the two.
Yeah.
And why we seem to be have become and are becoming prepared to assume that whole philosophy.
Right.
Because how did you get the United States people worked up for 2 world wars, being afraid of the terrible Hun? I say this all the time. The Hun couldn't cross the channel. How in the heck did they get Americans to believe that the Hun was going to come across the Atlantic Ocean? It's like, come on.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because I got a quote here that you and I have talked about before from Dorothy Thompson, who was a noted American journalist. And she wrote about the plans of the Third Reich to put together a union of states and economies. And she wrote this in a New York Herald Tribune, May 31st, 1940. The Germans have a clear plan of what they intend to do in case of victory. I believe that I know the essential details of that plan. I've heard it enough times from a sufficient number of important Germans to credit its authenticity. Germany's plan is to make a customs union of Europe with complete financial and economic control centered in Berlin. This will create at once the largest free trade area and the largest planned economy in the world. In Western Europe alone, there will be an economic unity of 400 million persons. To these will be added the resources of the British, French, Dutch, and Belgian empires. These will be pooled in the name of Europa Germanica. The Germans count upon political power following economic power, and not vice versa. Territorial changes do not concern them, because there will be no France or England except as language groups. Little immediate concern is felt regarding political organizations. No nation will have the control of its own financial or economic systems or of its customs. The notification of all countries will be accomplished by economic pressure. In all countries, contacts have been established long ago with sympathetic businessmen and industrialists. And here's the kicker. As far as the United States is concerned, the planners of the world Germanica laugh off the idea of any armed invasion. They say it will be completely unnecessary to take military action against the United States to force it to play ball with this system. Here, as in every other country, they have established relations with numerous industry and commercial organizations to whom they will offer advantages in cooperation with Germany. And I think that's it. They had a very large, very powerful fifth column within this country. And, of course, Prescott Bush and the Harrimans and Brown Brothers Harriman Union Banking Corporation was part and parcel of that, one of the most important elements.
Well, part of the Lusitania talked about supposed German provocateurs that were over here prior to World War I. Mm-hmm. And then William Ramsey brings up the fact that who was also involved in this whole game of spy versus spy versus spy, but Aleister Crowley, who knew George Viereck, and Viereck was a leading German personage in New York City prior to World War I. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, too, because also beating around the country at that time was this fear. Actually, it was a fear of communism, but but what I found interesting was that a lot of people were buying into communism in the United States because of the supposed egalitarian element to it, which is, of course, baloney. Mm-hmm. So you had all this stuff going on. So you had the communist thing happening, the Red Scare, and then you had the whole, German thing going on. Originally, it looked like in World War I, Germany made it very clear they didn't want anything to do with us. And then, of course, they were roped into this whole situation with the Lusitania, so that's where that was at. But then the second time around, you're right. As that one book states, was it John Carlson's, Undercover.
Yeah,
and there was and there was that strong sentiment there. And it was interesting, as I'm sure you found yourself, that they wanted another government and they wanted the capital to be Denver.
And that just might happen.
Well, yeah. And now take a look at this.
That Denver airport thing is really scary.
Yes.
If you know what I'm talking about, and I know you do.
Sure. Well, Colorado is spook central anyway. You want to be safe, go to Colorado when the hard rain falls.
I was really surprised when I started seeing pictures of these murals at the Denver airport. It was like something out of, a horror movie or so. It was just odd, strange looking imagery.
For what's supposed to be peace and brotherhood and save the children and all that, the way in which it was depicted, it left you with a duality. Because there wasn't, the way it was done just wasn't, I don't know, as warm and fuzzy as the message was supposed to be. But think about what we've talked about, though. Wanting another country, wanting a different kind of country or government within the United States, centered in Denver.
Right.
And then you have what took place in Europe. What Ms. Thompson talked about. Look what happened. I mean, first of all, the 1939 treaty got thrown out the window because obviously Germany and Russia did duke it out. Mm-hmm. You talk about Finland being taken as part of some of what they were going to be awarded. They took anyway.
Right.
Interesting though that Finland didn't really suffer the same fate as Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia.
Well, it's because they were bigger and because they were tougher and they fought back and they made it very painful for the Russians and that may be a lesson,
But in the end. We have
they're a tiny country. I mean, what are they? Finland maybe had 3 or 4 million people at the time, and Russia had probably 200 million.
But they play better hockey. Jari Kurri.
The Finns proved themselves, to be courageous. I mean, they weren't going to go down without a fight, and they made a good fight early on. But they were forced in a position where, they didn't want to see their women and children slaughtered,
Plus the whole country, I mean, let's face it, it's winter there for like 11 months out of the year. I mean, not that Russia doesn't have, some territory in that area, but
they weren't equipped, they weren't equipped well. And one thing the Germans did, they watched that conflict very carefully because they wanted to see what the weaknesses of the Russians were, and they realized that the Russians just, for one, had poor tactics because Stalin had killed off the cream of the Russian army as far as their officer corps because he had all these trials and he was afraid that the military was going to rise up against him and throw him out, and that the Bolsheviks would be dethroned. And as a result, he got really paranoid about the army and just went in and wholesale, arrested and eventually hanged the majority of the best officers in the Russian army. And so they had poor leadership. They went in, they were ill-equipped for the winter, even though, that they came from an environment where they should know better, but they went in, they were poorly equipped. And they didn't have ski troops. And the Finns came up with a method where they would wear these white ski outfits,
right,
and you couldn't see them. They were camouflaged, and they used very quick, lightning type guerrilla raids
yep.
on them, and they would cut up their columns. And the Germans learned from that, and they equipped their troops properly. Or at least at one point they did.
Yeah, right, because then it gets really weird.
Yeah,
when they go in for that strike, and that's another thing. But
yeah, we don't need to discuss military tactics, but
no,
that's basically it.
But I'm trying to nail down an idea that was brought out in Thompson's article or writings. It is Thompson, right?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, Dorothy Thompson.
Right. But what happened was exactly what she said it would happen.
Yeah.
But not the way it would happen. Well, I mean, you take a look at it, right? Okay, World War II's over. What's the big deal? Germany gets rent, in two. Russia grabs a whole bunch of stuff. And then we play the stalemate for, 2-3 decades. And then all of a sudden, wall comes down, Germany's unified, and here we have, though it's coming with fits and starts, we have, not the European Germanica or whatever, but we have the European Union, and whose economy is like the 700-pound gorilla.
Well, it is Europa Germanica.
To a certain extent, yes.
In effect, and they knew that, and they had been planning on that for an awful long time, Viz. I mean, they had planned all this out. Whenever they knew that they were going to lose the war, they had planned out what they were going to do to come back. They never gave up. The heavyweights within the Nazi Party never gave up.
Well, you hear the whole thing, and they sold it to us also as the Soviet Union has crumbled. Give me a break.
Yeah, sure it has.
And Ronnie goes up and does his famous acting job, tear down this wall, right, Ronnie?
Oh, yeah.
So what happens is what? The trilateral go over and tell Gorby, hey, guess what? It's time to downsize.
Yeah.
And they tell Germany time to unify. And, I mean, I could not believe how quickly that happened. And when Renaissance Landscaper and I were talking about it, he's half German, half Italian. Mm-hmm. And the way he was going on, I'm going, so what are you telling me then? I said, do you think that you should leave Germany ununified because are they necessarily disposed to be warlike? And Renaissance Landscaper, who was, he's like Thomas Jefferson of landscapers, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. He goes, yeah, they are. I mean, here he is, half German and such, on his mother's side, but I couldn't believe he just went flat out said they should not be unified. But that whole...
I would have said the same thing, I agree with him, but it's inevitable, and it was, it's part of the plan. It's going to bring about the New World Order.
Well,
and so that has to be.
What do you think about this then? We've always talked about the way things really are. What runs the world is business. Mm-hmm. Not democracy or freedom or any of this other stuff. It's business. Well, you take a look at Germany today, they don't really have to rule with a military, and I don't think militarily they're all that impacting.
Well, they're working on that, Viz. The European Union, they are working on a European Union army, and that if they pool their forces, that they will have military. They will have a considerable military might because they will have the armed forces of England and France, and of course Germany is pretty good at military maneuvering, and they'll have nuclear weapons because England and France already have them, and they're equipped to use them. So I mean, it wouldn't take that much for the European Union to be a military power almost overnight.
Oh, no, the military, that the Union would be, yes. Germany in particular, no. But they don't have to be. If they're viable economically, what it's all going to come down to is nothing but business. I mean, when you take a look at what the Club of Rome portrayed in that one map, if you remember, they had 10 regions, which I think now are the unions. Adjustments here and there, but it's all about business. So
it'll be an oligarchy of ultra capitalism, both financial and industrial. And that's what's going to be running the world, along with, I believe, what I call the beast system is what the New World Order is, and it'll have its emperor. It'll be a revived Roman Empire in the European Union. It'll have its emperor, and it'll have its pope, i.e., false prophet. I mean, it'll be political, economic, and religious.
That's after the dust settles.
Yeah.
From
that'll be the new boss.
Well,
same as the old boss, just different form.
And with the United States, what I think the script is that once again, we're going to go abroad and get into it. This time it's going to backfire on us, and so we're going to get hosed on the Eurasian continent, and we're going to be left more or less bereft of any kind of defense. And then things are going to happen here as well. Not necessarily lobbing in some ICBMs or whatever, but I do believe you'll see nuclear detonations in certain cities, and a lot of this stuff is going to happen from within. Who knows? It's an unpleasant thing.
You look at this. There was a couple of books written by neo-Nazis, The Serpent's Walk, and there's another one that the guy wrote. William Pierce, he's dead now, but he was a very intelligent, very dedicated Nazi, and used to be a professor of physics at Oregon State. The guy's not a dummy, or wasn't a dummy. And he was working with the Nazis in Germany and, of course, all over the world. It's a worldwide thing. At any rate, in one of his books, or one of the books published by the National Alliance, I believe it was Serpent's Walk, the way that the United States is taken over is by biological and nuclear terrorism, which is fomented by them. The stuff is brought in by them, and they let off nuclear bombs, and they start with biological terrorism within the cities, and eventually, of course, everything breaks down. Martial law takes over, and they're at the top. They're the people administering the martial law. They're the people that take over because they're revolutionaries. They're dedicated to it. They know what's going down, and they put it together and take over. Well, and I think one thing about Pierce that really is really frightening about that guy is he had knowledge beforehand of what was going to happen with 9/11. He did a radio broadcast, a shortwave radio broadcast, I believe, in '98. And in this broadcast, he talked about if you live in New York City, you better get yourself a hard hat if you work downtown. If you work in one of these high rises, you better be afraid because Osama bin Laden is coming. Now, how did he know that?
He said bin Laden?
Yeah, he said Osama bin Laden is coming. And he started talking about all the hatred against America, and because the Jews run America, and so forth and so on. But the guy had knowledge. It seems, it may have just been a hunch on his part, but I don't think so. Because I don't remember anybody talking about Osama bin Laden back in '98 other than, he had the Mujahideen, he was involved with that, earlier on with the Russians in Afghanistan. He was known about to an extent, but he's saying that the guy was coming. And he was talking about New York City specifically. I'll have to pull that quote out sometime. It shouldn't be too hard to find it. And it was I read it in an article by a guy who was talking about the connections of the Nazis, neo-Nazism to 9/11. These people have their finger in a lot of pies, and they're very dangerous.
Just as an aside, you made me think of something, but in the book City in the Sky, which is about the World Trade Center, it has an image of an ad placed in the New York Times, March 2nd, 1968, and it shows the two towers and a plane coming in from the right about to strike one of the towers.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you ever seen that one?
Yeah, there was a series of things that you had one time on your website where you had different photographs and posters and things of that nature and ads, all of which were showing like a foreshadowing of 9/11.
Yeah,
I believe it was your website.
Yeah, well, yeah. You didn't see this one because I hadn't seen it.
Okay.
But there were others there. This is from a party that did not want the towers to be built. A lot of people didn't want the towers to be built. I would say most didn't.
Yeah.
But that was the force of David Rockefeller, backed by his governor brother, then Governor Nelson Rockefeller.
It's funny how whenever they want something done, it gets done.
Well, they kind of allude to it in this book, excerpts of which I've also seen in the transcripts of two documentaries that were run on PBS. One was called, I believe, City in the Sky, after this, and the other one was Center of the World. Mm-hmm. If I got that right. Or Why the Towers Fell was the other one. But they talked about what happened in those days, and there was no two ways about it. They ran the show, and as the one reporter said, I don't know if it was this fella, one of these two, James Glantz, it might have been him, he was involved in one of the documentaries. He said, but there was a group of people who got what they wanted done. And that's what happened. That's how they got it done. But that Pierce would know that. I remember Pierce when he was doing the broadcast. I listened a little bit, probably within a year of his death. What I had to laugh, though, was that he would get so wrought up when he would talk about Bush, mm-hmm. and he would go, that feckless, smirking nincompoop. Sounded like Dan Aykroyd, And I just bust out laughing. I mean, that's a whole scary
he had
thing.
the National Alliance had a show here on Austin Access Television. There was no local guy doing it, but they had a show, and it had Pierce on there. And it just blew me away. I mean, it was outright Third Reich Nazi propaganda. In fact, some of the posters that they would show during the show, they would have these little, montage things, and they would show these different posters. And a lot of them I recognized from doing research on the Nazis. They date back to the Third Reich. They would have, white man, this is what you're fighting for, and it'd have a beautiful young blonde German woman with a small baby, and it was just like white man, and it was like, oh yeah, this ain't Nazi stuff at all, Well, and there was just tons of this stuff where they, were just promoting the National Socialist agenda, the Nazi agenda right there. And I was just shocked, that they would come out and, be on Access Television in a relatively large city like this. It was pretty bizarre.
I'm just looking at this ad, and they were trying to hammer home that the towers would be a problem for safe navigation. And divert flight patterns and be a whole pain in the neck for air traffic controllers. I mean, they were trying to do anything they could to keep that from happening. But to get back to what's Nazi about us nowadays, and when I think about with Peikoff outlining something that's very important, and that's the whole idea of collectivism. Mm-hmm. Which is what's been in the schools now for quite some time. All this group work is fine, but basically, and of course what we see in society with game shows and stuff, all this stuff about, well, you're nothing except what of your value. And also it was an invitation, according to Peikoff, not to think.
Exactly.
Just act. And of course they used economic fears, xenophobia as well, but you have to prepare.
Well, they've dumbed down the education system as much as they can, and they're still working on it, I'm sure. But, what better way to keep people from really being able to think critically than to dumb down the education system to the point where they aren't taught how to think critically? I know there's a big difference, not that I had a tremendously great education as a young person, but I see a difference in what kids are learning now and what they learned during my era. And one thing that just amazes me is the inability to write and to speak the English language. I'm just amazed at how poorly people communicate. And I read a lot of emails in the course of business, and a lot of people just, they can't communicate very well at all.
I tell you
it's
what.
It's not that they're dumb, it's just they haven't been taught.
No, they're dumb. Hey.
We have one not been taught and one dumb.
Well, if you ever look,
maybe both. I don't know.
I mean, whenever you go to read an article online and there's a section for comments,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would have to say 90% of the time, well, 90% of the time it's the spelling is really bad. I'd say 70% of the time, the people who state stuff are absolutely idiots. I mean, I won't go into all that. But anyway, that's where you find out where America's at. When you look at the people who consider themselves educated, informed perhaps, erudite, urbane enough, whatever you want to call it, to comment, and you look at this stuff and it's like, oh man, are we in trouble?
Yeah, they can't write a simple declarative sentence. I mean, they can't punctuate, they can't spell. It's like they were just, they sit them in a classroom for a certain number of hours a day and then pass them. It's just, try to keep the natives from getting too restless. And that's about the best they seem to do.
Well, try this on for size because this says a lot, and you'll appreciate this, and it ties into what's going on here, especially with. Look, we know what's happening in this country, but Republican registered voters and Democrat registered voters aren't getting it. And that is, you can fight about which one of your guys and women should be in office, but the thing is, legislation is being passed, somebody's passing it, and it's all pro-corporation. So, like I had said, the same soccer moms that are upset about the Constitution and okay, are also upset about all the crazy stuff that's being put in the food, for their children, and they don't put it together. It's like Soccer Sally, and that's what Pierce used to say. Remember Soccer Sally, Mom? I think he would say, and Joe Sixpack. That were the two. Sally Soccer Mom and Joe Sixpack. But those same people who are all PO'd, and rightfully so, about food that is obviously becoming more and more corrupted, don't understand it's being allowed to happen by those you vote for in D.C. You can't blame the passage of this stuff on the other party, because if you took a look at the voting for this stuff, you'd find all your people are doing this. So what's the point?
What they don't get is they have controlled opposition. What they don't get is that the American political system is like a vulture preying upon the American taxpayer, with two wings, a left and right wing, if you can really even call them that. You've got the Republicans and the Democrats really doing the same thing.
Of course,
they're being controlled by the same corporations. Your vote is meaningless. It really is. I mean, it's mostly cosmetic. Well, I don't want to vote for that guy because he's got an ugly nose. And it's makes about as much sense.
Well, I mean, you simplified it, but the thing is, most people vote against the other party rather than for their own.
Right,
I mean, that's what it's come down to. But in the meantime, all this other stuff that's probably even more injurious to our, quote, freedom, because of what it does to us on the inside, which should belong to us but really doesn't anymore, it's being allowed by these creeps in the district. So what is the point? You're absolutely right. But
long ago, the powers that be within the elites, and I'll just use the term elites, they discovered that they could control the American government and could control American society if they controlled the media. So they started buying up the media in the late 1800s, and they bought up the majority of the newspapers way back then, and eventually they've bought up the radio and television stations and our networks as well. So, I mean, you really don't get news on mainstream news that tells you anything that they don't want you to hear, and by that I mean the elites. And everything is colored by the way they want the public to see it.
Well, I'm not making a bigger deal out of this, but I've said this before. What I thought was really interesting, I mean, it caught my eye, was how quickly after they just started to assemble, the Egyptians did in Cairo, in the square. It was only 3 days of this. And all of a sudden, and I use NBC as an example because that's the one I stay with, just so that I guess I have a finger on the pulse of what they do. And of course, that's Rockefeller's baby as well.
Yeah.
But they came out with a title for it, Rage and Revolution. They came out with a schematic logo. And I'm like, isn't it a little early to do this? bang, they were ready to go. And they're still running that now. So I just thought to myself, yeah, man, this is a wag the dog script without a doubt.
Well, whoever at the CIA was handling the operation probably worked long and hard on coming up with a name, for this spontaneous revolution that took place over there. And like I said, he came up with a logo. I mean, it's like, come on.
Well, in time I'd like to know, and I think we will, but I don't know, maybe years later, exactly what assets were being used to get this together. The CIA, I don't know. I think it would have to come from within the Brotherhood. Mm-hmm. Now, who's handling them is another situation, but they have not pointed to the West that much. There's been some rhetoric about the West. Momar is running his mouth about the West a bit too, but that's pretty much it. I just find it interesting that it had to come. I mean, because when I look at these revolts and stuff, like with like with Libya, I'm like, okay, they're the rebels. The rebels in quotation marks. Where did the rebels get all the hardware?
Yeah.
I mean, all of a sudden, they got it together. You're talking about something that would have to approximate divisions or battalions. And what did that all happen? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Did they get a box and open it up and it poured right out like that?
Well, I mean, I could go down a list of all the different countries where the CIA has been involved in overthrowing governments and assassinations, et cetera. I mean, it would be a long list, too, because it's taken place over, 65 years, 66 years, ever since the end of World War II. And the fact of the matter is the CIA goes around all over the world, protecting American interest or making policy, for the American government or carrying out policy.
Well,
and I mean, anybody that thinks that we aren't over there involved in that business is just naive.
I'm sure there's a lot involved in that. This time around, I don't think it's just from the United States or such. And I think it has to definitely be pipelined through a completely Islamic/Arab organization or organizations. Mm-hmm. The people are not going to react if they think it's been Western spun. But certainly something had to happen, especially with Libya, that these rebels would be ready to go. So they trained somewhere, and something was going on now for a couple of months that nobody said anything about. Like you said, it's managed news. Mm-hmm. But it had to happen. Even when they started having a bit of a violent turnout in Egypt, I'm like, well, somebody's got to be running this stuff. Where is this coming from? As much as you have people who may not know exactly what's going on, you certainly have a hierarchy and a certain phalanx of people who got this thing going. And when they dropped the internet and it kept on going, I told you the one feeble excuse was like, well, we made a lot of cell phone calls. Yeah, okay. So that's why I'm saying this is very interesting, the anatomy of how this came about. The other thing that still I think is interesting is that somehow, some way, although it looked like it might get involved a little bit, Saudi Arabia still hasn't gotten anything on itself.
Oh, no, it's not going to.
You think? Okay.
No. Saudi Arabia, they're part and parcel of the New World Order. I mean, they have been since their inception. I mean, the United States and Britain brought Saudi Arabia into being, and especially the American oil companies have, been part and parcel of that business too. In fact, I could talk about that if you want.
If you want to make it a whole thing, we'll do it another time. Yeah.
Yeah. That's fine. Did you want to go ahead and talk some more about the Skull and Bone Society, or? Yeah,
why don't you wrap it up with the Skull and Bones? And the thing I want to ask you about that as well.
Sure.
I like Sutton. I trust Sutton probably more than any writer, any researcher who did anything on all of that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. But he's still one guy, and it doesn't make him wrong if I disagree, but he hammers on Skull and Bones quite a bit, and he also hammers on the trilaterals. Mm-hmm. Much we would impute to those boys down at the old SOJ. He imputes to the trilats. Now, I'm not accusing him of hiding anything. I just find it interesting that, it's all the trilats that did it. Mm-hmm. However,
well, really, you got to consider that, this work was done quite a while back too, and the trilaterals were a big deal, during that period of time. I think that was on, most people's minds about the Trilateral Commission and what they were doing. And so that has a lot to do with it. But here's from another source. We can talk about the Skull and Bones.
Oh, no, I'm not cutting that down whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just wondering, in the whole scheme of things today, if Skull and Bones and, quote, the Eastern establishment has more or less just been morphed or absorbed into something else. Because, even during the Vietnam days, and I think it's written about by Woodward, whoever put out that one book. What was it called? Oh, help me out here. The one in which Kissinger is quoted as saying that soldiers are dumb pawns.
Oh, yeah. I know that quote by Kissinger, but I don't remember the book.
Yeah, it'll come to
title.
Me. But it was talked about because it seemed, according to the author, and I'm wondering, is that Woodward? I think it was Woodward, yeah, that the generals didn't like the Eastern establishment.
Right.
And, of course, we heard about in the late 19th century that the farmers and other entities in the Midwest and the West didn't like the Eastern bankers, and you saw that in The Wizard of Oz also symbolically.
Yeah, that's been kind of a conflict of sorts all during American history, different regions. But there was a book written, I think, by Carl Oglesby called Yankee Cowboy War, and the deal there was the conflict between the Eastern establishment and the Southern and Western elites. I guess you'd say the people in the Sunshine States versus the Yankees.
Uh-huh.
And that's been and there's probably some legitimacy to that, but I mean, when it all comes down to it, I think the elites work hand in hand with each other.
And the thing is, was the heyday of Skull and Bones doing what it eventually was tasked to do, and that was kind of make us ripe for the acceptance of the Nazi mentality. Mm-hmm. Because there is a connection there with some sympathizers with Germany, Bush and Harriman and others. And, that seems at that time it was a very ethnic thing, and I just find I look at Bones now, and you look at some of the membership, mm-hmm. and I mean, there's blacks in it now, and I don't even know if there's women in it now, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think there are.
Yeah, so it's like, it doesn't seem to be such an odious thing as it used to be.
Well, I think it's still odious, it's just that, they're being more inclusive, and they're bringing in people, from groups, that were not involved before. I think it just, got a wider sweep, kind of in keeping with, the political correctness that is so important, that seemingly in America today.
Well, and again, this is just my feeling, and I'll, do with it what you will.
Okay.
Well, I'm wondering if Skull and Bones facilitated what we're living with right now, mm-hmm. and that responsibility that they had has more or less passed away because they got the job done. I mean, heck, you're looking at possible third Bush becoming a president.
Yeah, we were talking about Jeb Bush recently. I don't remember if we were on the air when we were talking about it, but, I'm starting to think people are just going to forget that they were PO'd at George Bush, George W. Bush, and we may have a third Bush in office, which would mean that we have, we've got a third Nazi that will be president of the United States. The way I'm looking at it.
I'll tell you right now, from what I pick up, because Victor Thorne was saying, oh, my goodness, you kidding me? They don't want another Bush back. I'm like, Victor, it's not the way we look at it. It's the way that the people are being prepared to think about it. And if you hear Rush and these other right-wingers and such, what's creeping back into there's no discussion. They just tell you what the hell to think. And that is regarding Ronnie Reagan so fondly, and making him sound like he should have his face on Rushmore, and then also the last departed Bush all of a sudden doesn't look too bad, and well, he did this. So I think they're preparing the votership to swing possibly to accept another Bush. I think that they would open the arms. I mean, look, a lot of people were willing to take back Nixon years after the whole thing went down. That was interesting. So if you can consider that being a possibility, well then how much crazier is it for the Republican votership and all those other groups, whether it's if the Tea Party would embrace him, or No Label Party would embrace him. Hey man, you could have Jeb back in a week.
Yeah, I don't see it outside the realm of possibility that he could win the Republican nomination and become president. Sarah Palin, I don't know how strong she would be as a candidate. I know that, outside of her obvious, good looks, she really doesn't offer a whole lot as far as being a foreign policy expert and, et cetera. She may just be considered too weak by certain elements, the Republican Party. But whoever wins the 2012 election will be the person that the elites want to win that election. I don't know who that'll be, but I can easily see a Bush going in there.
There's a lot of talk. He says no, he's not going to. And there was a spate of magazines and such that came out with Run Jeb Run, and somebody says, well, he may come out this time just to see what it's like. And I'm like, look, if this guy comes out, he's not going to come out to lose.
No,
it takes a lot of money.
Absolutely not.
Right. And it's like, no, if this guy's going to do it, he's going to do it. Whenever he throws his hat in, if he does, and I believe he will, he's going to win. It's not going to be any, testing the waters out and waiting another 4 years. I don't believe that at all. But here's the one thing I thought was kind of sick. Honestly, when you were talking about Sarah Palin, okay, but check this out, man. I mean, George Bush was an embarrassment. Sarah Palin is an embarrassment. Obama is an embarrassment. Obama didn't do anything. I mean, not that he has to, but take a look at his political career. Kind of short on the resume before he pops into the Oval Office.
I really think that Obama probably has some very heavy connections to intelligence and heavy connections to New World Order figures to have been able to have moved up the ladder as fast as he did. Of course.
You get selected, you get coronated, whatever. I
think maybe I think that this whole thing with the Muslim Brotherhood, I think they're going to start raising serious hell by the year 2012 to really get a big mess going on over there in the Middle East, and a lot of anti-Americanism and a lot of anti-Israel sentiment whipped up even farther than it is right now. And there's a possibility. I think it would be. It may be. May have been done this way on purpose, but look at it this way: who's going to get blamed for that? It's going to be Obama, because people are going to go, "Well, Obama didn't do anything while those Muslim Brotherhood guys were taking over. He didn't do anything to stop them. He didn't help Mubarak. Because plus they're going to go, well, Obama, he's a Muslim. They're going to go through that whole Muslim thing again, and and of course he's black, and that's not going to help him with the right wing. And I think he's just kind of the perfect foil. That may be the reason why he won.
Well, there you go. But what I was talking about Thorne was would he leave and become known as a Jimmy Carter Democrat, or is he going to stick around and become known as an FDR Democrat? Because that was all the rhetoric, and I understood it quite rightly. That he would be in a situation where, and we're not out of this, by the way, where all of a sudden you had to create jobs by bringing back the WPA and the CCC.
Oh, yeah.
But my point, as far as being kind of like in the Mad Magazine view of this, is that you got a dummy in George Bush, you got a guy that looks like, I don't know, that he just got picked off the street and thrown in there in Obama, but you break the color line, so what's next? Another cement head. Who's a white woman.
Yeah.
And I'm like, can you imagine that? Can you imagine actually having to deal with her? Oh, man.
If she comes on and says, how do you like your freedom, one more time?
Freedom, yeah. I know, it's like she's a waitress in Fargo. Damn. Oh, jeez.
It's true, man.
It is.
You're ordering coffee and here she shows up.
Yeah, I mean, you live in Alaska and you're not Scandinavian, so don't sound like a Scandinavian in North Dakota. Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, how do you like your freedom now? Oh, I know, this is getting out of hand, I know. But what did she say? Something about, she made some crack about, what was it, with milk?
Yeah.
Oh, and I forgot. And
the one about Russia was just, I can look at Russia across, oh my God.
Well, that makes you an internationalist, yeah.
I can look across the street at a law firm,
That'd make you a lawyer.
Make me a lawyer,
yeah.
I mean,
I know. Oh, so anyway.
Oh my God, when she said that, I was like, oh my, this woman is not only, she's a bimbo, I swear to God.
Well, I mean, how sick is it, though, that Rush can get on the air and without vomiting profusely, talk about Sarah Palin like she's some kind of, strategist.
I think he's got a thing for her, man.
Well, but
the way he talks about her, he gets all fired up to the point of, sexual excitement.
Well, I don't think it would happen. He probably gets that a lot from other things in Palin.
Oh, boy.
But I mean, no, he does it, Beck does it. They're all talking about Palin like she's some kind of Ronnie come back in a skirt. And I'm like, how can these listeners to that show, no matter how pitched they are, how much they support the Republican Party and hate everything else, how can you sit there and absolutely say, yeah?
Well, to be honest with you, you use a comparison with Reagan. I'm not a big Reagan fan. In fact, I really seriously dislike the guy. And I'm really sick and tired of hearing about what a great president he was. I mean...
The big sleep.
I mean, he was nothing more than George Bush was running the country during that time. I mean, they tried to eliminate Reagan with the assassination. You're never going to convince me that Hinckley, wasn't a mind-controlled assassin. And Hinckley and his family had connections with the Bush family going way back to the 40s. And as far as it looked to me, and I could flesh this out if I have to, if people don't understand what I'm talking about, but that assassination was set up, and Reagan happened to pull through, and then it was like he got the message, and then after that, George Bush went ahead and started, doing all the presidential duties without having to worry about Reagan. All Reagan did was go out and give speeches, and he did it very well because he was a good actor. Not a really great actor, but a good B-movie actor.
I do remember.
And he had a charismatic personality, and people liked Reagan, and that's just great. But Reagan was, talk about a right-wing jackass. I mean, that guy, all during his time in Hollywood, he was with the Crusade for Freedom, which was nothing more than a vehicle to bring Nazis into this country. And he, along with Nixon, was involved heavily in that.
Well, Harry made a point once, and now it made sense. I didn't care for Reagan back when I really thought these things mattered. But I mean, he said stuff so many times that flipped out his cabinet members, like Meese and the guys, and they would have to come flying out afterwards and do damage control. And Harry brought up the point, and it does make sense to me, that after Ronnie got popped and he didn't die, he knew they couldn't try him again, and they knew they had to coexist. But every so often. And this is why this is probably a manifestation of when they say that Reagan was extremely likable. And that was, Ronnie would go out there and not do their speech. Every so often he would look at him and go, I'm going to use this one. And they'd freak as he walked to the podium.
Oh, yeah.
And he knew that they had to deal with him because they couldn't do anything else. So every so often Ronnie did his thing and they went nuts. And actually, that's cool if you think about it. But, yes, you're right. But remember something, too. And by the way, the name of that book is The Final Days from Woodward. That's what it is.
I want to talk about Reagan and the Crusade for Freedom, which was an idea devised by Allen Dulles, who, along with Aleister Crowley, was one of the most evil men of the 20th century. But they had this thing called the Crusade for Freedom. I'll read about it. It's coming from a book by Loftus and Ahrens. Said, as a young actor in the early 50s, Reagan was employed as a public spokesperson for an OPC front named Crusade for Freedom. Reagan may not have known it, but 99% of the Crusade's funds came from clandestine accounts, which were then laundered to the Crusade to various organizations such as Radio Liberty, which employed Dulles fascists. Bill Casey, who later became CIA director under Ronald Reagan, also worked in Germany in World War II on Dulles' Nazi freedom fighter program. When he returned to New York, Casey headed up another OPC front, the International Rescue Committee, which sponsored the immigration of these fascists into the United States. Casey's committee replaced the International Red Cross as a sponsor for Dulles recruits. Confidential interviews, former members of the OPC, former members of the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office. With the help of the Dulles and Angleton clique, the Vatican had sent many of the Eastern European Nazis to Western countries, including the United States, Australia, and Canada, where the right wing recruited them to get out the rest of the Eastern European ethnic vote. As a young congressman, Nixon had been Alan Dulles' confidant. They both blamed Governor Dewey's razor-thin loss to Truman in the 1948 election to the Jewish vote. When he became Eisenhower's vice president in 1952, Nixon was determined to build his own ethnic base. There's a very high correlation between CIA domestic subsidies to fascist freedom fighters during the 1950s and the leadership of the Republican Party ethnic campaign moves. The motive for the under-the-table financing was clear. Nixon used Nazis to offset the Jewish vote for the Democrats. In 1953, when Republicans were in office, the immigration laws were changed to admit Nazis, even members of the SS, and they flooded into the country. Nixon helped oversee the new immigration program. As vice president, he even received Eastern European fascists into the White House. Well, it's more talking a little more about Nixon than about Ronald Reagan, but Reagan was part of that particular movement to bring Nazis into this country to be used by the Republican Party. Got another article on that I could read if you like.
Sure.
When Truman was reelected in 1948, Nixon became Alan Dulles' mouthpiece in Congress. It was Nixon who worked with CIA Director Beadle Smith to steer investigations away from the intelligence community. The CIA was grateful for Nixon's assistance. Dulles had been recruiting Nazis under the cover of the State Department's Office of Policy Coordination, whose chief, Frank Wisner, has systematically recruited the Eastern European emigre networks that had worked for the Nazi SS. Says editor's note, since World War II, these Nazi emigres have been instrumental in many U.S. government covert operations, including drug and weapons smuggling, Latin American death squads, and pro-fascist regimes. LSD mind control experiments like MK-Ultra, the Republican National Committee's Ethnic Heritage Councils, as well as the presidential campaigns of Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, and George Bush. Once in the U.S., the Nazi emigres quickly went to work to get out the ethnic vote for the Republicans. In preparation for the 1952 Eisenhower-Nixon campaign, the Republicans formed an ethnic division, which recruited the displaced fascists who had arrived after World War II. The ethnic division attracted a significant number of Central and Eastern European Nazis who had been recruited by the SS as political and police leaders during the Holocaust. These fascist emigres supported the Eisenhower-Nixon liberation policy as the quickest means of trying to get the power back into their hands in their former homelands. In 1953, when the Republicans were in office, the immigration laws were changed to admit Nazis, even members of the SS. They flooded into the U.S., and Nixon oversaw the new immigration program. As vice president, he even received European fascists in the White House. After a long, long journey, these Nazis found a new home in the U.S., where they reestablished their networks. In 1968, Nixon promised that if he became president, he would create a permanent ethnic council within the Republican Party. Previously, the ethnic division was allowed to surface only during presidential campaigns. Nixon's promise was carried out after the 1972 election during George H.W. Bush's tenure as chairman of the Republican National Committee. The Croatian Ustashis, along with several other fascist organizations, became an integral part of the campaign structure of Republican politics. When Nixon was forced to resign as a result of the Watergate scandal, Bush was transferred from his post as head of the Republican National Committee to director of the CIA to ensure that Nixon's garbage remained buried. Keeping the lid on the Nazi scandal was no easy matter. As director of the CIA from 1975 to 1977, Bush was up to his ears in fascists. In 1976, after 23 years in the White House, the Republicans issued a secret memo that recognized the valuable contribution made by the ethnic division of the party over the years, especially in defeating the Democrats in 1952. The irony is that the ethnic faction never played a credible role in winning any election, and in later years caused the Republican Party considerable embarrassment when pieces of the Nazi connection began to surface. That's from an article by Mark Ahrens and John Loftus, and some of the excerpts are from The Secret War Against the Jews how Western espionage betrayed the Jewish people. There's one other passage here I'd like to read. Richard Nixon's political career began in 1945 when, as a Navy officer, he was assigned to review some captured Nazi documents. Allen Dulles told Nixon to keep quiet about what he had seen and in return arranged to finance the young man's first congressional campaign. The documents that Dulles was eager to cover up concerned Karl Blessing, the former Reichsbank officer and then head of the Nazi oil cartel called Continental, or Conti. Conti was in partnership with Allen and John Foster Dulles' principal Nazi client, I.G. Farben, the infamous chemical weapons producer. Both companies had despicable records regarding their complicity with the Nazis and their ill treatment of Jews during the Holocaust. Dulles was also covering up Blessing in order to protect continued control of German oil interests in the Middle East. Blessing's Conti was the Nazi link to King Ibn Saud, whose family was empowered to rule the Arabian Peninsula thanks to Nazi collaborators within the British and U.S. intelligence, and Aramco, the Arab-American oil company. If Blessing went down, he would take a lot of people with him, including Allen Dulles. The Dulles brothers took Nixon under their wing and escorted him on a tour of fascist freedom fighter operations in Germany. Well, that's kind of the way that Tricky Dick got his start in helping cover up Nazi intrigues.
Yeah, I'm just thinking back, too, that the two figures that were probably most responsible for destabilizing Nixon were the same two that said there was no conspiracy in the assassination attempt of Ronald Reagan, and that's Kissinger and Haig.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, they're all tied together. And, of course, you know, all roads lead to Dallas, and who was there but Tricky Dick was to lied about that and got caught.
Yeah.
So, yeah, he was a mess. I tell you what.
Know, and George H.W. Bush said that he didn't remember what was going on that day. He didn't remember where he was the day that Kennedy was assassinated. Well, you could refresh his memory to let him know that he had been in Dallas earlier. So, at any rate.
Yeah, and there's a letter, a letter that is written deliberately, I don't want to say cryptic, but a little evasive, supposedly from Daddy Bush. And Colvin got a handle on that from, I forget the guy who does the work almost expressly on De Morton Shield. Mm-hmm. You know who it is, too. I just can't remember the guy's name, but he sent me along a JPEG of that letter. Very interesting with regard to Daddy Bush and Dallas.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I mean, that whole group of people, you know, including Allen Dulles, Nixon, the Bushes, they were all involved. It's you know, there's just too much evidence leading to their involvement and too many things that they've said themselves, you know, that lead you to believe that they knew an awful lot more about the assassination of JFK than had ever come to light publicly. Oh, one thing I want to read in, you know, I guess we can wrap it up pretty soon, but one thing I wanted to read about was Allen Dulles, just a couple of things about him, because he's a very important character in the development of the Fourth Reich, which is taking place in America, I believe. Supreme Court Justice Arthur Goldberg once stated that the Dulles brothers were traitors. Some historians believe that Allen Dulles became head of the newly formed CIA in large part to cover up his treasonous behavior and that of his clients. That's from Christian Dewar in Making a Killing. It's another quote here. Allen Welsh Dulles was born to privilege and tradition of public service. He was the grandson of one Secretary of State and the nephew of another. By the time he graduated from Princeton in 1914, the robber baron era of American history was coming to an end, ushered out by the Sherman Antitrust Act, which had been ushered in 1911 to break up Standard Oil, and by the institution of the progressive income tax in 1913. The ruling elite was starting to view government less as their own private preserve and more of a unwanted intrusion on their ability to conduct business as usual. That shift of loyalties in itself may account for many of the paradoxical aspects of Dulles' career. Dulles entered the diplomatic service after college and served as a State Department delegate to the Paris Peace Conference of 1919, which brought a formal end to World War I. The Versailles Treaty, which came out of this conference, included a provision making it illegal to sell arms to Germany. This displeased the powerful DuPont family, and they put pressure on the delegates to allow them to opt out. It was Allen Dulles who finally gave them the assurances they wanted that their transactions with Germany would be, quote, winked at. Dulles remained a diplomat throughout the early 1920s, spending part of that time in Berlin. However, he left government service in 1926 for the greener pastures of private business, becoming a Wall Street lawyer with the same firm as his older brother, John Foster Dulles. By the middle 1920s, Germany has started recovering from the effects of the war and its post-war economic collapse, and the great German industrial firms were looking like attractive investment opportunities for wealthy Americans. W.A. Harriman and Company, formed in 1919 by Averill Harriman, son of railroad baron E.H. Harriman, and George Herbert Walker, had led the way in directing American money to German companies and had opened a Berlin branch as early as 1922 when Germany was still in chaos. At that time, Averill Harriman traveled to Europe and made contact with the powerful Thyssen family of steel magnates. It was to be a long-lasting and faithful partnership. The Thyssen's steel business has suffered greatly from Germany's defeat, and old August Thyssen had decided to guard against future setbacks by creating a system of private banks. He founded one in Berlin and another in the city of Rotterdam and in the Netherlands. In the Netherlands. The wake of Harriman's trip, a third bank was added to the network, the Union Banking Corporation, founded in 1924 with George Herbert Walker as president. Having their own personal banking system made it easy for the Thyssen's to move money around, launder money, conceal profits, and evade taxes. By 1926, W.A. Harriman was doing so well that Walker gave his son-in-law, Prescott Bush, the gift of making him a vice president. In 1931, W.A. Harriman merged with a British firm to create Brown Brothers Harriman, and Prescott Bush became a senior partner. During the 1930s, Brown Brothers Harriman would increasingly direct its clients' investments to German companies. The Rockefeller family was prominent among those clients, and Standard Oil developed particularly close connections with the chemical giant I.G. Farben. It was into this heady atmosphere of high-level investment and financial manipulation that Allen Dulles entered when he joined the firm of Sullivan & Cromwell in 1926. He would become the lawyer for the Thyssen's Rotterdam Bank and would also represent other German firms, including I.G. Farben. Well, it's kind of gives you a general rundown of who Allen Dulles was and what he was trying to do. And he was, like I always say, that all the Nazis weren't in Germany, and Allen Dulles definitely was, from everything I've ever read or seen or heard about him, he was more of a Nazi than half the people in, Hitler's inner circle.
Well, what's ironic? When you mentioned his bloodlines and said that he was, he was the grandson of one Secretary of State?
Right, and a nephew of another.
Yeah, the uncle was Robert Lansing. And what's interesting about that is that he was a person, a hawk, like Joseph Tumulty, and both of them were advising Wilson. And Wilson's Secretary of State was William Jennings Bryan. And according to that book, The Lusitania, Bryan wanted to go on a peaceful path. The other two wanted war.
Right.
And eventually, Lansing accomplished two things. One, he got the war, and two, he got Bryan's job. Because Bryan basically left in protest. He had been a Wilson backer and had seen that he had, that Wilson was not his own man and going the other way. But I have to laugh because it mentions even in that book that who used to fool around with Robert Lansing were his two nephews, John and Allen Dulles. So yeah. It's amazing because the bloodlines continue.
Yeah.
But here they were going for war with Germany, and then later on would be seen as something as of a Nazi sympathizer, which in a way, playing both sides of the street doesn't really surprise us, does it, Larry?
No, not at all. That's the way they work it. There really is no loyalty to anything other than power, and whatever it takes, whoever has to get hurt just gets hurt. Doesn't matter that they work both sides of the street, like you said. And the Dulles brothers were talk about snakes. I mean, these guys were, you can't name anything that went down of real importance in American politics.
Right.
That those guys didn't have some hand in,
Well, that book that talks about, was it The Bay of Pigs expressly? I'm not sure. I got to think about this now. Two authors wrote. No, they were going after, I think, the CIA. I'll find the title in a second. But getting through all that, what was interesting was what was given for public consumption as the reason why the Bay of Pigs failed was because the airstrike was coming in from another time zone, and they got screwed up. Now we've been through this. I mean, there's no way in the world.
Yeah.
Now that
doesn't operate like that.
No. And that's why they have Zulu time or Grand Meridian time, which avoids that kind of stuff. But that was what was given to the public, so you know that's a lie. Right then and there, you know something else is up.
Anybody that in the military or had anything to do with air operations knew that was crap.
Yeah, and who was in Puerto Rico the day of the invasion to give a speech? But Alan Dulles. My point, what's so big about that? What a great listening post to be in to find out if everything's going the way you wanted it.
Sure. I mean, Alan Dulles, you can't think of very many things that, like I said, there are very many really important aspects of American politics in the 20th century that he didn't have a hand in. I mean, literally, behind the scenes pulling strings to get things done. One of the reasons why the Great Depression took place in 1929, why the United States economy went down, was because of investment going over to Germany. And the reason that they had done that is, with the Sherman Antitrust Act, the American corporations couldn't pull off the same kind of monopolies that they had before. So in 1922, I believe it was, they passed the Webb-Pomeranian Act, or Webb-Pomeranian Act, which allowed them to have cartels and trust as long as they were overseas, which is really crazy. You went for a period of about 3 or 4 years where I forget how many years it was, but Teddy Roosevelt was the one who had really tried to put the burn on the robber barons by passing the Antitrust Act. And then all of a sudden, they come up with this Webb-Pomeranian Act, and that allows them to invest overseas. So where did they invest? Well, they invested in Germany, and that was led, the charge for that was led by Alan Dulles and John Foster Dulles, Sullivan and Cromwell. Got a quote here on that. The 1920s and early 30s were a profitable time for American investors in Germany. The breakup of American cartels at the end of the 19th century, followed by Teddy Roosevelt's trust-busting legislation in the 1910s, induced the early multinational corporations to seek a more friendly climb offshore. Germany not only permitted cartels and vertical monopolies, it encouraged them as a means to rebuild its industrial might after the devastation of World War I and the Versailles reparations. German scientists, sponsored by German corporations, led the world in research in physics, chemistry, and biology. So esteemed was the German intellectual edge at the end of the 20s that American scientists who wished to make their mark would take their advanced degree at a German university. The secret strings of a German investment were held by American lawyers sitting on the boards of German banks and corporations. Alan Dulles, for example, sat on the board of the Schroeder Bank, with offices in London, New York, and Berlin, ostensibly owned by a prominent German banking family. The real controllers were Sullivan and Cromwell clients. Sullivan and Cromwell clients were not the only foreign investors in Germany, nor were they the only ones to hedge their bets by making small donations to the infant Nazi Party. Following the $26 million cash settlement with Mussolini over disputed lands in 1929, the Vatican invested nearly all the proceeds in German industry, but at least one small investment was made in the Nazis as well. The following incident was reported by an eyewitness. Sister Pascalina, a nun, who was the personal aide and devoted admirer of the papal nuncio in Munich, and the man who would become Pope Pius XII on the eve of World War II. She said, Hitler came one night to the holy residence of Archbishop Eugenio Pacelli. All others in the household were asleep by then, except Sister Pascalina. Hitler told Pacelli that he was out to check the spread of atheistic communism. It did not come as a surprise to her, therefore, in light of Pacelli's hatred of the Reds, to see the prelate present Hitler with a large cache of church money to aid the rising revolutionary and his small, struggling band of anti-communists. The Holy See devised a special shield to help protect it from the looming international conflict, its own financial institution, the Vatican Bank. This was the only monetary entity in the world that was completely immune from outside audits, protected by Vatican sovereignty, and with the added convenience of diplomatic immunity. During the war, the Dulles brothers and the Vatican were drawn into a symbiotic relationship. Sullivan and Cromwell investors needed the Vatican Bank to launder their profits under the watchful eyes of both the Nazis and their own governments, while the Vatican needed the Dulles brothers to protect its own investments in Hitler's Germany. Isn't that special?
Who wrote that? Who wrote that?
This is from Loftus and Aaron, the unholy trinity, the Vatican, the Nazis, and the Swiss banks.
And who wrote also that passage you read before this last one?
It's the same thing.
Okay.
It's from the same book.
No, the only thing I'm going to laugh about is this, and this is not a yeah but statement, or Loftus has his parameters as well. Not a big deal.
Yeah.
Not a big deal. But I have to laugh because don't you for 1 minute think that Teddy Roosevelt didn't do exactly what he was told to do? That whole bit about him doing the fish shaking at the robber barons and the Sherman Antitrust was all taken care of by Philander Knox, who was the robber baron's lawyer. You remember this?
Yeah, I remember reading something about that. One thing Loftus is he puts out good information, but his viewpoint, whether it's his true viewpoint or not, is pretty limited. I mean, he's like, Yahoo for the Constitution, and America is really a great country, and blah blah. He makes a lot of excuses, is what I'm trying to say.
Well, the thing is, excuse me. The thing about Roosevelt, this was not the point of the whole thing you read. I understand that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, for clarity, here's what I'm saying, because this is part of the puzzle, too. And that is Roosevelt was very hip about what happens when you don't play ball. Mm-hmm. 20 years before McKinley was assassinated, which made him vice president, he saw Garfield get assassinated. Mm-hmm. All right? Now, he knows, I would say, I've always contended that the first fully handled president was Teddy, because he understood the way things go.
Yeah.
And if you cross your handlers, you pay with your life. I'm still not satisfied, and I don't know that I'll ever really understand exactly what was behind at least Garfield's, although I'm still trying to get through this biography, and what McKinley had done to run afoul of the boys. Mm-hmm. But it was funny because I don't believe ABC did this. I never thought that would happen, and now the way I look at things, I'm surprised it ever did. They did a report once on Bush and Dan Quayle, mm-hmm. and they did a video of the front of the White House and said, here's where Bush is working with people, Daddy Bush that is, to create OSHA laws and all that for the safety of workers. Mm-hmm. And then they panned to screen right, and they went up into a hotel room, and they pulled in on open doors from a balcony. Amazing shot, and what they had was the back of Dan Quayle sitting at the end of a long table, and it said, and this is where the Council for Competitiveness is eviscerating all the OSHA laws. Well, think about this, and that's what happened with Roosevelt. He's got the people eating out of his hand, the big stick, the big fist, all this stuff. We'll fix those robber barons. Hey, man, those guys were not fools. So they had Philander Knox figuring out how that could work for their benefit. And really what I think happened, Larry, was that those antitrust laws succeeded only in preventing anyone that wanted to come up to catch the robber barons.
Right.
They had,
and they went around them with the Webb-Pomerene Act, in 1922, I believe it was. So they went ahead and started investing overseas, especially in Germany. And like has been pointed out by more than one researcher, that including Loftus and Aaron, that this is one of the main reasons for the Depression. I'll read from Alex Constantine, in an article on the Knights of Malta and other aspects of Nazism, but it says, before the beginning of World War II, Hitler and the Nazis were funded in large part by American industrialists who were comfortable investing in a country where the workforce was extremely controlled and the union movement was outlawed. Mussolini's fascist Italy also attracted huge investments at a time when America's trade union movement was at its most rebellious. This unprecedented shift in capital from America to Italy and Nazi Germany was a major contributing factor to the Great Depression of 1929 to 1941. Corporations such as Rockefeller's Standard Oil, Alfred P. Sloan's General Motors, Henry Ford II's Ford Motor Company, and others financed Hitler's war machine and indeed directly profited from the slave labor of the war years, as recent lawsuits have proven. It's been documented that Henry Ford gave Hitler personal gifts up to $30,000 prior to the war. When leading journalists of the day, such as George Seldes, attempted to inform the American public of this unholy alliance, and its implications to American freedoms, they were promptly silenced by the press barons who openly supported the fascist movements in their numerous journals. In fact, according to a recent biography, William Randolph Hearst had Hitler and Mussolini on his payroll as columnists, and racist articles written by Hitler have been recovered. Multimillionaire Hearst believed Hitler would be a great world leader. Quote, ironically, one of Hollywood's founding fathers, Charlie Chaplin, was promptly deported from America following the release of his classic film, The Great Dictator, which mocked and ridiculed Hitler.
Aye.
You know, it's funny. I mean, if you write articles about him praising his regime, you know, you're doing well, and then if you try to do a satire on him and show him up, you know,
but this is
taken out of the country.
But what you mentioned, does that not underscore what we've been saying, and that is this country has never had freedom of expression. That's bullshit.
No, not really.
You only get to express what you want as long as most of the people are agreeing with it. But when you come out with inconvenient speech, forget it. You're hooted down, you're censored, you get thrown off the air. There is no such thing as freedom of expression.
Well, I'll tell you what, in today's America, there certainly isn't any, because I saw that personally when you did your show on
Blog Talk
Radio, and I listened to that show, and I thought, well, that's pretty good. There was nothing, I didn't see anything or hear anything that you did that was outrageous, and the next thing I know, they not only threw you off the air,
they took out the archive.
They took out the article or the recording and wouldn't allow it to be
and
put out to the public.
The guy either called Jim or emailed him and said, I want to talk to you after the show. And as soon as that happened, Jim either called me or emailed me. I forget. He emailed me, and he said, they've thrown us both off. But I wrote the guy, and I said, look, what's the problem? And he quoted me. What he did is he copy and pasted the terms, of like what you can't do, which is vague, And I said, okay, fine. But what did I say that fell under that umbrella? And he wouldn't talk to me. I'm like, what is it that I said? I understand, fine. You deemed it that? Tell me what it was that you deemed that way. And I never got anything from him. And I'll tell you, Killtown was on then. And I don't know what happened. I don't know what was offensive. There were other 9/11 shows. I don't know that they're any good. I kind of think when I took a look around what was there, it wasn't too hot. But I don't know. So,
well, the sad part about it is that was a good show. And I wish that, you still had a copy of it. I don't remember all the content. I just remember that it came off very well, and it was well conducted. In fact, it was one of your better 9/11 shows from my perspective.
Well, I had Killtown on again, which was a long time in coming, and we decided we were going to take a look at Flight 93. And that's what we did. And Flight 93, is underreported about, undercommented about exactly. By Jones and everyone else. Nobody touches Flight 93 and barely touches the Pentagon.
The third rail.
Yeah, and we had some good stuff. I mean, I had done my homework for years, and so did Killtown. The only thing I'm going to say about this, and we got to wrap it up, and I appreciate you mentioning that, but there were a number of little douchebags, that were looking for Killtown. No, they wanted to. They were looking for Killtown.
Yeah.
They didn't like the fact. In fact, if you remember in that show, I told somebody to basically pound it. Mm-hmm. When he goes, I want to know Killtown's name. I'm going, this is not a show about Killtown's real name. Okay?
Yeah.
And he's a little maggot that's out there to this day. He's on Talk Shoe now, I think, or something.
Wasn't he the idiot that...
yes, he is.
That Randy had to kind of treat him like a whack-a-mole or something?
That's right. You got it. And I'm also assuming he's the one that called in to Alan Watt to ask where the falling out had taken place between myself and Alan Watt. This guy's no good, and I won't talk about it because I don't want anybody. I mean, I won't get any more definitive because I don't want anybody going there.
Yeah.
I don't give this guy traffic. You can understand that, but you're right. There you go. But it's always been that way.
But it was so evident. I mean, I knew it happened, and I knew that I really didn't live in a country that had freedom of speech. But that was just like when it actually happens to you in a personal friend, then it's brought home to you much closer, and you just like, my God, they would not only would they not allow him to be on the show anymore, they take it off the air and then won't tell him what he did wrong. was like something out of Kafka,
Yeah.
you know.
And then we found out later on too. And the thing is, like I said, there's other 9/11 shows, but I don't know they're any good.
Yeah.
A lot of them might be pro, United States, anti-Arab. But, you saw also what they found, and that is that Block Talk gets heavily funded by the DOD.
Yeah.
So there you go. And in fact, if there weren't those little munchkins that got in the guy's ear, and I would really like to think it wasn't, even though I don't like any of them, but if it were really for the content, you know what? That's a badge of honor, damn it.
Yeah.
I'm proud that happened.
Yeah.
I want to say in wrapping this up, I want to identify the book that I was talking about before. It's The Invisible Government, written by Wise and Ross. Okay. It's about the CIA, and that's in that book, and you can read it online, The Invisible Government, under the chapter called Invasion, where it gives you the trumped-up reason for the failure of the Bay of Pigs, which I think ultimately led to, it definitely led to Kennedy's remarks at the New York press conference 10 days later, where he goes into that speech about there is a ruthless monolithic conspiracy. Yeah. Well, okay, that covers a lot, and of course he's dead within a year.
Yeah.
So, also, I-Man once, I didn't get a chance to talk to him in full about this, but we had talked about the Bay of Pigs. He brought it up, it was either pre-show or post-show. Mm-hmm. And I said, look, I-Man, I cannot make sense out of this. Some people say the CIA set it up. Some people say the CIA sabotaged it. Because it doesn't make any sense that this would work against Kennedy unless Kennedy wanted it. And what the I-Man said to me, though we didn't have time, he goes, both. So in other words, yeah, they could have gone along with Kennedy, so to speak, to make it happen, and then they scuttled it. And that's why I think that Dulles was in Puerto Rico that day to make sure that his plans did not go awry.
Well, I think Dulles, he's like Crowley. Dulles is the political side, it's like a Janus,
Yeah.
You got one side of the coin is Crowley and the other side is Dulles. Dulles being the political economic arm and Crowley the spiritual arm of the New World Order.
There are characters like this, aren't they, Larry, that seem like they're familiar spirits and are just everywhere all the time involved. And Rumsfeld is another one of them.
Exactly.
Rumsfeld.
Exactly.
But that guy could not have been in more crap. I can't believe it.
Yeah, and what amazes me is every time I start doing research on these subjects, these same clowns keep showing up, and you keep going, my God, he did that too?
I would say also, probably during Teddy's administration was the time when the robber barons then started going about buying influence. Mm-hmm. It's around 1915 or so where you start to find out that their foundations that they created, their tax-exempt foundations, got into the history textbook writing, and also basically held a conference and told about 15 editors of the largest and most influential U.S. dailies that this is how it goes.
Right.
And then in 20 and 21, you have the busting on the scene of Edward Bernays, the first public relations man, and also the creation of the Council on Foreign Relations. So,
I think Goebbels one time said that America produces the greatest propaganda in the entire world. America was way up ahead of everybody else, and he had learned a lot from studying America and what we would call PR. He just flat out called it what it is, propaganda.
Larry, isn't it true? I mean, the problem with Americans is they've been propagandized into believing they can't be propagandized.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, that's it. What are you going to do? No. But it's 11. No, but it's America. No, you don't understand, dude. That's what they're saying in Russia and everywhere else, too.
Right. Right. It's, like the old Bob Dylan line, propaganda all is phony. And, it's simple line, but so true. Just all this phoniness around us. Growing up in this country, and I'm glad I grew up here as opposed to a lot of other places, believe me. But there's so much crap that you get fed, from the time you're a little kid, going into school and on up, to growing up that it's a wonder, that people can make any kind of decisions or figure anything out after, listening to all that crap.
I got to ask you this. Just as a kid, I'm going to say it to you and ask me, I'm going to ask you what your gut reaction was to this when you first came upon it in the history books. Maybe it's nothing, but this is something I always wondered about. We got into that chapter where and there was this like painting of this significant event. It says, Admiral Peary opens up Japanese to trade. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
And I'm like, why is a military guy going over there? And what happens if Japan doesn't want to be opened up to trade? You know what I mean? And I'm like, okay, fine, it's the United States. And I went on. Do you remember that?
Once I started looking into it, you realize the Japanese definitely wanted nothing to do with the outside world. You know, their trade was very limited. They wanted nothing to do with the United States or anybody else from, the Europeans or anybody else. It's still an insular society in one sense, as far as their culture and everything.
I know.
And it was like, he went over there with some warships and said, hey, you're going to trade with us whether you like it or not.
I mean, they could have at least gone over with a bunch of merchants and trinkets and beads. You know what I mean? I don't like that.
Yeah, and it's kind of like Columbus discovered America. Well, that was news to the Native Americans who'd been here for thousands of years.
Oh, isn't that the truth? Isn't that the truth? And this is where we get to this whole thing about believing in the United States and how it's a Christian country. And God. I mean, like, did anybody want to tell? I mean, was God like okay with Western Europeans killing the Aboriginal people who were here first? I mean, how did that how do we miss that? Yeah. God, you talk about being ethnocentric.
It just doesn't really dovetail too well with the idea of Christianity and and what Jesus taught. There's so many people that want to hide behind the cross and do things that are completely opposite to what Jesus taught us. I mean, they do it every day.
It's true.
It's disgusting because after a while, people don't really know what Christianity is. People that really have never been on the inside of it, really, people that are not born again, don't have a clue. And Christianity just looks like a cruel religion to them.
Well, if anybody came away from anything, it would have been in the first hour, where just when you started reading that, we understand that there are radical elements in every single religion that will demonize that religion in the eyes of others and will get the job done when it comes to doing exactly what Jehovah doesn't want done, and that is the shedding of blood. For what?
Well, I believe you brought up the point that maybe it was Bob Rossio. I know that I read a quote from a book about Hitler's machinations as far as Stalingrad goes. And it seems that Hitler was not a stupid guy. Hitler had been a soldier himself, and he knew that there was a need to retreat strategically at times. Stalingrad was definitely a point in case. And yet he went ahead and forced the troops there to stand their ground, which meant they were going to get slaughtered, which they did, and they also got captured in large numbers. But really, a lot of what he was doing was a blood sacrifice to his God with a little g, which is Satan, or Lucifer if you prefer. And that's really what a lot of this was about, was to bring about that great blood sacrifice, which is what down through the ages, you can look at the Mayans. I mean, they were heavily into blood sacrifice, and they had the worship of a winged serpent. Well, I mean, it becomes kind of obvious to you after a while. The real quote God of this world, as the Bible says, and even the Luciferians themselves will say that. And then they back off and say, "Well, now Lucifer is just the intellect, and it's this and it." No, it's not.
He's a spirited fellow. Yes.
Yeah, it's an entity. It's an evil entity, a fallen angel that God cast out of heaven because he had sinned against God and wanted to be like the Most High. And the Bible tells you that plainly. And Jesus said, "I saw him fall from heaven." The Father cast him out.
You watch movies about the mafia and how they have people in an inner circle and they go out and do the dirty work, and then one day what happens is they get done in. Just a very mild example of what it is with Satan, in the sense of that he lies to everyone, and everybody thinks they're in the inner circle, and then one day they turn around and they're getting kneecapped.
Exactly.
Understand, too, as it pertains to Eurasian continental wars, that both Napoleon and Hitler did very stupid things, which is really it's very interesting how they can make such blunders when it's obvious that you do not go after Russia in the wintertime.
Right.
I mean, you
outrun your supply lines. You don't equip your troops with winter clothing.
Right.
And you find yourself in the middle of the Russian winter, and you have to retreat during that winter.
But you see, they had succeeded in doing what they were tasked to do, and then after it, you get a cleanup crew, as we've talked about, right? Mm-hmm. That goes ahead and cleans up the cleanup crew. Mm-hmm. So Napoleon ditched his army, and Hitler ditched his army, and they both did exactly what they were told to do. I cannot believe that either one of those individuals was either vain, egotistical enough, or stupid to go ahead and do that. They got their orders to do it. That's why I think, among other things, that Hitler never died in that bunker, man.
No. So. And that's why so many of the people in the German officer corps were so angry and wanted to kill Hitler was because of the stupid decisions that he made, which they could not fathom. In
that movie Valkyrie, obviously refers to that time. Yeah. And I have to believe, we've never seen any literature along these lines. Maybe someday, I don't know, there'll be diaries or journals you can read. Those guys must have known that they were being given up. Those officers must have known that he was playing to lose.
Well, they chalked it off. I know I've read some of them just chalked it off to Hitler being mentally ill. Well, I don't know that it was really mental illness, so it's just pure evil,
Yes, he was. And, it's Rosio had talked about, I forget who was close to Hitler, who had said that he had heard him at night talking to somebody, but there was nobody in the room.
Yeah. Rauschning talked about Hitler having fits and saying to him that he had seen the Antichrist, and he was intrepid and cruel, and I was afraid. And there one time Rauschning walked in on Hitler having a fit where he was, just trembling in fear and was, pale-faced and sweating profusely, and started telling him he had, that the, the being was there, whatever it was. Can't remember Rauschning's exact words, but he said they had to set him down, get him something to drink.
Molari cheese.
Yeah. Well, it was like, and Rauschning, was basically, I guess, letting the world know. Of course, Rauschning had to leave Germany. He fell out of favor with Hitler, but he was trying to let the world know that Hitler, was in contact with something beyond the human intelligence. And another fascinating aspect of the Nazis that we haven't talked about, maybe we could at some point, is the technology that came out of the Third Reich at the end, the wonder weapons, the secret weapons that they had, and where did they get this knowledge? And also we might talk about UFOs and all that. So I don't know.
Well, obviously,
there's a lot of stuff to talk about.
Well, hey, look, I've had Colvin on 170,000 times, and we still haven't figured anything out. But no, we talked about that with Colvin and Master Story, and
that's good.
And Vic and Gordon sent you an email at your behest about a certain audio you guys had done along those lines, because that's what Gordon was saying too. It's like, what is with these guys? And it's true. I mean, they went after looking for the big mojo, whether it was the Himalayas or it was Antarctica. What was going on with that? And of course, that honestly, that's something that is talked about throughout time. And as I had written in the email to you guys, even Ackerman did not refer to that in that sense, but was talking about the world as it was then, the Himalayan plateau being of a certain importance, and that's what people have been looking for.
Right.
I wonder sometimes if those who climb Everest aren't looking for something other besides the summit. I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, one thing, we're talking about Antarctica, and you remember the deal with in the late 40s, Admiral Byrd went down there with an expedition. Fact-finding, scientific. But the strange part about it is they didn't take ships down there that were like the type of ships that would be like floating laboratories. They took warships down there. We're talking battleships and destroyers and cruisers. We're talking warships. Why would you need warships if you were just going down there to do a scientific expedition?
Well, ask Peary. No, I mean, no.
Yeah, I think there was a battle that went on down there.
Probably
with the Nazis.
Well, so there might have been a little skirmish. Oh God, how much was that hurt? Oh Lord, can you imagine fighting in that weather?
Oh man.
At least the sunlight's not out for long. But
you know, there's a lot of speculation and some evidence pointing to the Nazis colonizing down there. You know, and they had submarine pens and so forth. That they had a colony of their own down there. Who knows?
What Antarctica might turn out to be probably the world's greatest secret. I mean, how many decades have gone on? How many countries are down there doing research that nobody knows anything about? Mm-hmm. What's going on in Antarctica? I mean, is it the portal? I kind of think it might be.
That's what I think it is. I mean, you know, obviously this is all speculation, but something very odd about all that. There's something that just doesn't add up, and like I say, I mean, I can't imagine them going down there on a scientific expedition with cruisers and destroyers. You know, it just doesn't make sense.
They probably should do another Men in Black, where Will and Tommy Lee go down there, you know, and they come inside. There's all these monsters and everything. Say, hey guys, how you doing? You know. Oh, you know, he's acting up again. But yeah, it could be that what's going to scourge this earth might be what comes from underneath it. So
it very well could be. I mean, you know, obviously this is just kind of science fiction type stuff at this point, but it may actually be there.
Yep. All right, we'll bring this thing to a close. This is part 3 of We Are What We Hated, and we'll keep moving on. Let me say this, just think about it. If you want to entree part 4 with whatever we didn't do about S&B, we can do that. It'll be your call, and we'll do whatever you want come part 4.
Yeah, just briefly touch on that the next time. There's, you know, a lot of other stuff that we could get into, and but that is kind of important, and I mean, it is important. I just didn't get as much of it done but it was fun. We were having a good time discussing.
We hope they are too. Are you still awake out there, folks? Hello. Well, listen, you lay out the tree and the branches and everything else, and we'll be okay. We'll go wherever you want to go.
Okay.
So, all right, just stay right there if you will. This has been Larry, the Contractor Guy, part 3 of We Are What We Hated, and we'll